Today on Pilgrim Radio's Whose People, Angela Hunt on the Good Seed Collective.
A good seed book is one that kids enjoy reading and that has messages that are going to uplift and not fill their heads with things that are contrary to Scripture.
Angela Hunt, next. Children's book writer Angela Hunt says she's frequently asked to recommend good books for kids. It's certainly a difficult terrain to navigate, especially since many children's books don't conform to Christian ideals. So to address that need, Angela and some of her writer friends have formed the Good Seed Collective. Spencer Dalkey contacted her to get the details.
Would you tell us a little bit about yourself? I understand you have quite the background in writing.
Oh, sure. Golly, I've been writing since 1983, written a lot. I started writing for children because my kids were little. And so I sort of moved from picture books to chapter books, then middle grade books, because my husband is a middle school youth pastor. And I thought, boy, kids this age need books. And so then one of my editors said, why don't you try books for adults? And I said, okay. So then I started writing novels for adults. So I've written all kinds of things, fiction, nonfiction, for kids and adults, because I really believe that if you develop your skills as a writer, you can write anything. It just depends on what your interests are and which doors the Lord opens.
What doors did he open for you?
Well, just the fact that I'm still writing after all these years is kind of amazing. And I've been blessed to participate in a lot of collaborations with people. I remember once I got an email from my editor, and I called out to my husband in the next room. I said, my editor wants me to write a book with this football player's wife. Have you ever heard of Brett Favre? And he laughed and he said, honey, that's Brett Favre. And I said, oh. So anyway, I worked with Deanna, his wife, to write her breast cancer survival story. And I don't know, just over the years, all kinds of unique things have opened up. And I love being a writer. And a lot of my friends, I helped start an online group for Christian writers. And so we're always chatting about the challenges that we face today and how the market is changing, how readers are changing, and lots of different things. I've been in the business now almost 40 years. So many things have changed since I started.
I know the whole the Good Seed Collective is this thing that one of your authors, Robert Elmer, told me a little bit about. And it seems like maybe it's a relatively new sort of a thing that you're starting with a few authors. What inspired this Good Seed Collective, and what is it?
The Good Seed Collective is a group of Christian authors who have determined, A, to write for young readers, and B, to write good materials for young readers. Some of us took a look at what kids are reading these days, and it's not good. I mean, a lot of it is occultish. The young adult novels, they're anything but chaste or anything that you would want your teenage son or daughter to be reading, especially your preteen son or daughter. And kids have a tendency to want to read up. So like your 12-year-old might want to be reading books that are really written for 18-year-olds, and they'll be exposed to a lot of stuff that they really shouldn't be exposed to. So we thought, over our careers, a lot of us have written a lot of children's books. And if you're familiar with how the industry works, a book comes out and then it sits there. And then every year publishers have to keep putting new books out, which means that the older books don't get a lot of press, a lot of attention. They just kind of sit in the background and people forget about them. So we realized that between the lot of us, we've written an awful lot of valuable kids' books that are wholesome, faith-filled. Some of them are not overtly religious, but they're still good, clean, wholesome stories. So we thought we need like a stamp of approval that we can put on these books and let people know that there are still really good, wholesome books out there for parents to buy for their kids. So we came up with the Good Seed Collective. We even have an official stamp So every season we put out a new catalog because we're always finding new authors that A, like I said, are committed to writing for kids, and B, who are committed to writing good books for kids. We put out a new catalog every year. It's free for people to download. We have no budget. This is just a collaborative effort. So we put our catalog online. It's goodseed.info, and people can go there and either read the catalog online or download a PDF copy or an EPUB copy. Then that way, when you're looking for a book for your kids or grandkids or a birthday gift or something, you have the whole catalog right there, along with a brief little log line to tell you what the book's about. We have them in categories like picture books, early readers, mysteries. Middle school kids love mysteries because they're developing their powers of deduction. And then books even for young adults as well. So we've decided, we've got all these good books. Why don't we help get the word out so people know that they're there and that they're available for kids to read?
What I'm hearing is that maybe just some of these good books end up getting kind of buried in the publishing industry as they're continually coming out with new books.
And a couple of our authors have tried to submit new books and been told, even from Christian publishers, that there's too much Jesus in this book, or we don't really want to be as overt as this. And we're kind of not talk about Jesus. I mean, that's not the way it ought to be. So we believe that faith is an integral part of life, and that kids need to know how to share their faith and not be ashamed of it, and realize what a difference it can make in their lives as they're growing up.
Kind of to that point, what in your view, as you guys are putting together this catalog each season, well, first off, could you tell us what the season means, but also what makes a book a Good Seed book?
Well, these books are faith-filled. They're wholesome. A lot of them are humorous. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book on how to write kids' books. And I said, picture books, actually. I was being specific. And I said, the most important thing about writing a picture book is it has to have delight. It must delight the child and the adult who reads it. So we're looking for books that are delightful, that people enjoy reading. I can always tell a lot of parents and grandparents, when they're trying to buy a book for their children, they get these books that are really didactic, like Tommy stole a candy bar, Tommy ate it and got sick. And then the mom says, well, that's God teaching you a lesson. You shouldn't steal a candy bar. And that's a horrible story. That's a horrible story. I mean, it's a true principle, but what kid is ever going to want to read that book again? I mean, never. But books should teach a lesson, first of all, that the child learns the lesson instead of having somebody preach it to him. It's really, there's an art to writing children's picture books. And a lot of people, they think, I told my grandkids a story and they loved it. But there's a lot more to writing a really good children's books than just having your grandkids smile at it, because the child has to have agency, and he has to make his own mistakes, and he has to learn the lessons that result. So a Good Seed book is one that kids enjoy reading, and that has messages that are going to uplift and not fill their heads with things that are contrary to Scripture. I should mention some of the other writers. Bob Elmer, Robert Elmer, and Bill Myers and myself were the three that kind of got the ball rolling. But since then, Jerry Jenkins, Chris Fabre, Patricia Rushford, Robin Jones-Gunn, Lisa Ton Berggren, so many others have joined us. And so we keep all the books in the catalog, but every season we're adding more titles as more and more authors join us, and as some of our writers write new books to add to the collection as well.
I'm wondering if you could kind of speak to, just laying context. I like reading books. It's not to brag, I just do. And I often sometimes have older people come up to me and say, it's so great to see the younger generation reading books, but they never stop to ask, what are you reading? Yeah. Speaking to the point of, why does it matter not just that we read, but what we read?
garbage in, garbage out. That principle is very true. I understand why people say, oh, I'm so glad that you're reading, because in today's world, kids, well, it seems like they're all attached to a gadget, either their phones or their iPads, and they're always playing a game and talking. The other day, my little grandson, he's 8, I think, he was playing a game on his iPad, but he kept talking. And I said, are you talking to the characters? He said, no, I'm talking to my friend. He's playing too. And I went, oh my goodness, now we have community video games. So this just shows how behind the times I am. But to see people actually sitting with a book that doesn't blink and warble and carry on is a bit of a miracle. But also, books change lives. I was a reader as a kid, and I learned so many things from books, good, some probably not so good. But by and large, the books I've read were very good. They taught me about worlds I had never visited. They taught me about history I had never experienced. And one of my favorite books was The Nun's Story. I wasn't Catholic, so I was fascinated by the world of nuns, having experienced nothing ever like that, and by this holy rule that they had to follow. And it was based on a true story about this nun/nurse in World War II. And ultimately, she had to leave the convent because her urge to help people and to minister to them as a nurse kept conflicting with the man-made rule, stop every time the bell chimes, fall to your knees and say a prayer, that she had to follow as a nun. That was really so instructive in my spiritual life about, yes, obedience is important, but it's obedience to the call of God, not to a set of man-made rules. So even as a teenager, I read that book, and it was really instrumental in shaping my religious thinking.
My guest today is Angela Hunt. She's a writer and author and co-founder of the Good Seed Collective. A lot of good thoughts about how to read well as young adults and how to write for young adults. Details. Just like when we teach, like we ask questions to help people come to their own conclusions. Stories give us details that are, they can suggest ideas to us that we come to our own conclusion, I guess, as we process those details.
Well, the whole point of a work of fiction is you have a character, he's presented with an unusual situation, a different world, so to speak, and he enters it and establishes a goal. Dorothy's house gets picked up by a tornado and dropped in Oz. Her goal, I want to go back to Kansas. But then obstacles occur, a whole bunch of them. And we watch this character approach these obstacles and either defeat them or be defeated by them. So we learn about this character's personality, their character, who they are as a person, and we learn resources for dealing with life's challenges when we face similar things. That's why it's so important for kids to read, because who was it? I think it was Chesterton who said something about, we read fairy tales not to know that there are monsters, but to know that they can be defeated. I have just probably garbled that quote, but that's the gist of it. I mean, it's not that we want our kids to read about everything is perfect, utopian religious stories where everything is, God is love and everything's wonderful. It's about, no, evil does exist. Challenges will face you in this world, and this is how you overcome them. And that's what stories are all about. They teach us as adults, and they teach children, usually on a gentler level, how to overcome life's challenges. And that's why it's so important that the child protagonist learn his own lesson instead of having a parent or a teacher or a professor stand in and explain everything to him. Those stories just don't work.
It seems to me that in a culture like ours, when I think of Christian filmmaking, Christian writing, I kind of subconsciously equate that with it is subpar. It is not as good. How can Christians pursue good art, like I'm thinking of like J.R.R. Tolkien, like The Lord of the Rings is just dripping with like biblical ideas, but it's not in your face, you know?
Right. The Christianity is latent.
Yeah, sure. How do
Yes.
we do that? I guess. Big question.
I think you do it by making the faith has to be part of the plot. There has to be a faith storyline. It just has to be there from the beginning. It can't be something that's tacked on or pasted on or that's delivered in the last 3/4 of the book. It has to be a struggle that's going on throughout the entire story. If you're going to have faith in a world, a fictional world, then it has to be present from the get-go. Or you can write a parable story in which it's not as obvious, and some people won't get the parable, just like some people didn't get Jesus's parables, but others will. Those who have ears to hear will. So I've written some secular novels that were parables for secular publishers, and some people get them and some people don't. I always think of them as like an onion. You know, you have an onion and you've got an outer skin, but then an onion is just layers, layers and layers and layers. And the spiritual meaning might be an inner layer, but the external still has to be a very good story that people can enjoy. And if they dig a little deeper and peel a little further, then they'll find the spiritual meaning. But not everybody does, and that's okay. Being a Christian writer in a secular world is a challenge. And sometimes we write to a Christian audience, and sometimes we write to the world at large. But always we write from a Christian worldview.
In a culture such as ours as well, I'm sure we could talk about increasing illiteracy rates. People just don't read. So as Christians especially, I'm just thinking about how ours is a faith that is one that reads because the Word of God, of course. How can we teach kids, particularly to read literature well?
I think we just have to expose it to them. We start reading it to them when they are babies, and we encourage reading, even if you have to bribe them. You know, read so many books this week, and I'll take you to Chuck E. Cheese or wherever the kids are going these days. But it is important because when the kids are playing a video game, the images are being supplied by the game. When children are reading a book, their brains have to supply the imagery. And so if they're never reading books, that part of their brain is not being developed, fully developed. And so it's crucial that kids learn to read and to develop so that they can. I've had some people tell me I can't visualize things in my head. And frankly, that just amazes me. But I think it's because that part of their brain was never fully developed. But even when I'm writing, the story is playing like a movie in my mind, which makes it much easier, let me tell you.
Yeah, so many of those entertainment options competing for our kids' attention. It's easy to get cynical, I suppose, about the state of the world, but how do you see, initiatives like your Good Seed Collective helping plant those good seeds, shall we say, for our next generation?
Well, the one thing to do that's useful is to help spread the word. I mean, we've put this out there. We all try to mention it, but a lot of people don't know that it exists. So we're hoping that homeschool groups and libraries and other organizations will pick it up and just start buying books from that collection. And we offer all kinds and all genres. So we're trying to be efficient on that score. But also, too many times our kids will say, oh, I want such and such a book because all my friends will read it. And so we buy it and we give it to them, but do we really know what's in it? There's an awful lot of dystopian fiction out there now, especially for the older set. Everything is so bleak and so hopeless, and it is not a Christian worldview. And I think we don't want to deny that there is crisis in the world, but we don't want to say that everything's useless either. I remember once I read a young adult novel that won a whole bunch of awards. And at the end, the main character, I don't even remember what happened, but he walked away thinking, well, life stinks and you just get through it the best you can. That's the message of the book. See, every writer writes and leaves the reader with a message. A lot of secular people say, oh, no, I'm not into message fiction. Well, yes, you are, because your worldview always comes out. And usually the lesson that the character learns is a lesson the author chose that's going to be the point of his story. Christian storytellers are going to leave a message. It may not even be overtly Christian story, but the message is going to be faith-filled and hopeful. And if I'd written that same book, I would have written, yeah, life is tough, but you can find ways to get through it. You're surrounded by family and friends and people who will love and support you. Same events of the story could have had such a different ending and a different message. So that's why I think it's important that parents and grandparents know what's in the books that they're giving kids and give them stuff that you know is going to be a wholesome, life-affirming message.
There's a lot of encouragement there too, I suppose, to young authors who want to write children's books. What other advice would you, I suppose, supply to like young people who might be interested in doing that, writing young adult books and this sort of a thing?
Well, first of all, get educated. And I'm not talking about going to school, but the writing, professional writing is not the writing that they teach you to do in school. I know because I used to be an English teacher. And when my kids wrote papers that had lots of adverbs and adjectives, I'd go, yay, look at you using that vocabulary word. But no, that is not professional writing. In professional writing, you cut the adjectives and the adverbs because it has to be tight. It's all about say as much as possible in as few words as possible. There are actually very few colleges that offer a professional writing major. There are some journalism courses, but writing for newspapers is a whole different kettle of fish than writing novels. You know, it's a different discipline altogether. But fortunately, there are organizations out there that are dedicated to helping writers, and there are a gazillion how to write books. I have a line of them actually on Amazon. They're called Writing Lessons from the Front. And I broke them down because a lot of people will hand in a manuscript and someone will say, oh, you're having a point of view problem, or you're having, there's no tension in this story. So I have a book on point of view, the plot skeleton, how to plot a story, how to put tension in your story. There's 16 of these little books, and I mean little. The plot one I think is 40 pages because I don't believe in filling them with all this philosophy and blah, 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 blah. A lot of writing books are pages and pages and pages of useless words. But I explain, this is what you do. This is how you do it. Here's an example. Boom. Next book, topic. But anyway, there are tons of good writing books out there, and I've really dedicated myself in this last part of my career to helping train new writers by I'm kind of just the facts person anyway, to just lay it out there like, this is what you need to do. This is how you do it. Go forth and conquer, So that would be my first piece of advice. Oh, and another big one nobody wants to follow is start small. Too many people I have met at writers' conferences, they're working on a novel and they've never sold a bit of writing anywhere. And I'm like, it's like trying to climb Mount Everest and you can't even go up the stairs without panting. Start small. Get a copy of Writer's Market. It's a book. And it lists every magazine, every publisher, and tells what they're looking for, how much they pay, who you send it to, what they publish, how long it takes to hear back from them, and start writing small pieces, magazine articles, and catalog copy. And when I started writing, I didn't want to write a great American novel. I didn't know what I wanted to write. I wanted to help my husband pay the bills. And so I started writing magazine articles, and I would write an article for a Baptist magazine, and the next week I'd turn around and sell it to the Methodists because they don't compete. And I was selling magazine articles, but I was getting editorial feedback. I was actually earning a little while I was learning, and people started remembering my name because I would send out query letters. Would you be interested in an article on this? And if they didn't want it, well, I'd send them another query the next week. It takes persistence, determination, and flexibility. When they say, we like this story, but you need to change it by doing this, and this, don't get offensive and go, oh, I can't change my writing. Just say, yes, I'll change that for you. Thank you. Too many people start out thinking that their writing was dictated by God. And no, it wasn't. And so you just have to be willing to be in it for the long haul and to start small. Because then once you start small, you're learning how to write. And like I said, remember I said I started with picture books and then moved to middle grade. And then after I'd written like 20 of those, I wasn't even aware of it, but I was learning how to write fiction. So then I didn't have to ask my editor, can I write an adult novel? He said that to me. Why don't you write an adult novel? Because I'd learned how, and he knew I'd learned how because he'd seen my other stuff. So that is my chief advice, but way too many people want to start at the top. No, start small and work your way up. It's the sure path to becoming a professional writer.
You've been listening to His People on Pilgrim Radio. Many thanks to our guest, children's book writer Angela Hunt, founder of the Good Seed Collective. Go to goodseed.info. On tomorrow's program, it's Dean Sykes on bringing hope to a generation struggling with identity, purpose, and the weight of mental health.
On the outside, I was terribly confident to the point of arrogant. I was the president of the Pep Club, editor of the newspaper, stage managed all the productions, heavily involved, dating lots of girls. To look at it, it looked like my life was perfect. Everything was great. On the inside, every day I woke up going, I got to get through today somehow.
That's tomorrow at the same time, right here on His People. Thanks for listening.